this is going to be pretty minimal for what you see reflected. Like the shift, you could get away with a little bit of it. But what I'm doing is mixing it with my blue to just soften this reflection a little bit. If you saw this in person, this might be a full on 10 on the value scale, but this would be a 9.
All right, now let's get back to our guest, Christine Lashley. Christine is all set up and ready to go. You're going to tell us what you've got going on here.
Well, yes, what I have going on is just the bare bones of the painting right now. And I wanted to, this is my don't be afraid of the ugly start stage, because you have to, that's right. Let's just address what is going on here. And I'm building the structure of the painting. I want to go ahead and have all of my darks all set up so that everything is going towards supporting the lights later on in the painting.
Can you tell us, before you get rolling, because the comments are already asking questions,
okay,
what are you painting on? And then what colors are you using now? I can't tell if that's a blue or a black.
I know, and that's a good call. I'm painting on a panel called gesso board. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's from Ampersand. They're right here in Austin, Texas, as a matter of fact.
Oh, how about that? And then I've started liking using a gray neutral palette, because this already shows me what my colors are in accordance with value, and hence the really dark value. So I was off screen for a bit, but basically I'm mixing some transparent oxide with my French ultramarine blue. This is cobalt blue.
Is it transparent oxide brown or red?
Transparent oxide red. And to note, this is a water mixable paint made by Cobra.
All right.
And there's plenty of manufacturers doing water mixable paints, and that is what's happening here. I'm painting solvent free so that I could come along and take my water spritzer and move some of this along. Basically, this starts getting to me back to like a gray toning of the board.
So is this fairly new for you, this water mixable thing? Because I don't remember you doing that when you did your videos.
The videos, what ended up happening is I didn't want to just be a methodology painter, but this has started to become really important for how I approach a painting. And so the videos don't really, they go into that, yes, if you're interested in becoming solvent free. But if you're still working with solvent, that's okay too. So you can use the videos either way. And that's a great question, Eric, because that's what I want to stress for viewers today is do what you're comfortable with and then try some different ideas. This might spark a point of interest for somebody to start with this water mixable underpainting, which is what I do now exclusively. And I paint all solvent free, but more to the point, I'm painting in a direct manner. So this water mixable start only is for a very short and brief time. And you can see this is already dry to the touch. You see how I'm rubbing that? And this was done just 20 minutes ago, this little bit of drawing that I had.
And I want to ask you more questions, so I hope you don't mind. But
no.
Did you go to solvent free for a particular reason? And what would that reason be?
I missed the first part of your question. Sorry, Eric.
Well, what have you been doing? Just sleeping?
Oh.
I said, why did you go to solvent free?
Oh, solvent free. Well, I'm allergic to solvent. I was breaking out in hives, and it was not good. I had these weird symptoms, like kind of some brain fog, and it all came to, everything kind of came together when I was at a plein air event, and we were all going to dinner, and I was in somebody's car, and I'm not a high maintenance person, but I had to have them pull over because I was just feeling so out of it and so sick. And it turned out they had a bag of paint rags that were filled with solvent plus all of their paintings in the car. And that's what triggered me to know that that's Christine, you should stay away from that.
Well, I'm so glad you're okay.
Oh yeah, that was many years ago. I'm fine now. I can actually tolerate a little bit of solvent. But Eric, let me share with you these paints because somebody had asked about that. So these two blues are important, the French Ultra and then the Cobalt, because later you'll see me putting color in. And right now you're correct. It's very neutral. And that's where I want it to stay to begin with to get the maximum amount of color. Then this is Ruby Violet by Vasari. And it's basically just a cool violet that goes a little bit further towards the purple range. You can also use alizarin crimson or just a cool red. Anthraquinone red works as well. This is Azo Coral, which is basically equivalent to Cad Red Light, or Pyrrole Red is another non-Cad alternative. Cad Yellow Light. This is a type of gray that's just a convenience gray. It happens to be made by Cobra and is called grayish blue. But there's many neutrals that are made by many different manufacturers. And so I'd classify this as a cool gray. And then just titanium white, and M. Graham makes these paints with the white with some sunflower oil. So it prevents it from yellowing as it ages, but maybe that's
even though sunflowers are yellow.
Yeah. Yes, we had to stick in sunflowers somewhere. Yeah, so this is, now we're going to get into some fun value stuff.
All right.
So we have basically this, which is my super dark. So in a nighttime scene, and you can see my reference here, which I think is a little bit too dark, but I wanted to show kind of quote unquote bad reference, and how do we transcend bad reference? And
bad
one way
reference.
is bad reference.
Yeah, now we're showing your reference on the screen, your bad reference on the screen.
Well, it's good reference because it's Paris. So any reference of Paris is good, right? But you know, what can you do to extract like the maximum potential out of that reference? I don't want to copy it exactly. And so I have this other one that you could see here where I've got this soft cadence of blue, and then I'm noticing the variants of blues that I have. My end goal is to prepare everything to put on these last touches of glitter. So that's my goal, is to, even if this is kind of loose, to show that to viewers today. So we have to set it up carefully. And a lot of times people see a loose painting and they're like, wow, how long did it take you to do that? Or this demo I'm hoping will go fairly quickly, because at every brushstroke with every color choice, I'm thinking about my value choices. And that's when some people snooze off. They think value is boring, value is gray, but value is super important, because notice what I'm doing now, I'm playing with it. I'm making decisions based on what I want to do, and I'm able to edit the painting and support my choices for merging my reference together.
Okay.
So I have my blue, which is made from actually both blues and a touch of this very, you know, tending towards purple. So that cool red. Another favorite trick of mine is to take, because it's solvent free, because I like full paint, I also like wet and wet merged edges. And so I'll take some of this, and I might even decide, what if I just pull down in areas to merge the color? And what this is going to do is, even though I don't like to think about a focal point, I want to have the viewer see this first. So I'm aware of the dark and the light contrast. And you can see me kind of setting the stage at this early point in the painting for that. I did this from some plein air studies, obviously from a photo as well, but I visited this location a number of times, and that's something that can be really fun to do. If you see a location and there's, you know, what is it that sparked that moment where you thought, my gosh, I have to paint this. Well, what often happens is the photo just really brings you down because, like, you could see this one is just filled with more of a black color. And yeah, you can adjust it in Photoshop or whatever, but this is marrying the joy of painting and slapping on paint with that instant moment that I had while I was on location. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of bring the science of painting in with all the passion and fun. So paper towel is important. I'm using the knife, I'm using the brush. It's kind of at this stage, whatever is working. And notice I'm using a lot of full paint. So I mentioned before the water mixables, but I think it's good to know that you can basically do a solvent-free method with being mindful of your value, because I know where I'm going now. I know fully this is dark. So I don't have to try different things out. And you can do studies ahead of time if that helps. That's another way to approach things.
All right. If you guys are digging this, please leave a comment or a heart or a thumbs up. That's always helpful. And if you know that people you love would love to see this, make sure that you share this broadcast. Thank you.
Yeah, Eric, you've been so great for artists through the pandemic. Big shout out to you for helping us to stay visually entertained and adopt Zoom and, you know, Facebook Live and all of that stuff that you do for us. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm honored. I needed to survive, and this was my way to survive, to help you guys survive.
It is true. It's been nice to see people kind of come together and share ideas. And
well, we have viewers today from The Hague in the Netherlands, Lucerne, Switzerland, Italy. Got them from all over. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, definitely welcome. Now, I have a situation here where I don't want this tower to go right off the edge of the painting, and it's kind of doing that to begin with. So what I could do is have my friend Value help me out here. With the sky is going to be a little bit darker. I can just kind of suppress this because, again, I want to draw the viewer into this area. And sometimes
so you created a silhouette.
Yeah, silhouette is very powerful. My other favorite, I don't know if you'd call it a trick, but I like the idea of making a flip in value. In other words, this building, the future plan for this building is to kind of use that silhouette idea because it should be a mass shape. In other words, this represents a lot of buildings, but it's collected, and you can see I'm dragging the paint across. So getting back to that other visual trick that I like is to have the same shape and then have it flip into a different value. So the building is going to be both light and dark. And it's fun. It's fun to do that. Often you can get just further along than you think by just kind of scooting paint around. And this can be great for on location painting. You know, the smush of the paint kind of lends itself to stuff. Yeah.
A highly technical term.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, India. Welcome.
So next up, for kind of the process and things that I would think about while creating a painting, I want to have optically, if you imagine this in black and white, this sky color and the building color, I want to take everything much darker before it then goes brighter. So I think this is a point where people can just maybe get bummed about like where the painting is going, like, oh, who turned down the lights? And wait, that's not what the painting was about. This was supposed to be about a point of excitement, and now it's getting all drab. Well, that is, again, going back to this idea of value. And if you're new to painting, value is imagining all of this color in black and white. And now we have phones that will actually, you can hold up your phone and switch it to grayscale, or make your phone, take a picture and turn it into grayscale to double check your value. And so value is what our human brains see first. And then we see color second. And all of this happens in kind of like a nanosecond. So we're not aware of that process happening.
There's a confusion in the questions. Let me just
Okay.
ask you this question. Someone suggested that you started with water mixable and then switched to non-water mixable, or are you still always in water mixable?
This is a mix, because some colors that I don't discriminate at this stage. Just to clarify, I'm working with how I think of direct paint. So the direct painting technique is, it doesn't matter if it's water mixable or not. And the magic of starting with water mixable is that I could do all of these fat things on top of this water mixable paint, because now it's dry to the light touch.
Okay, so I'm just going to probe that just a little bit more, Christina. So
Sure.
what I hear you saying is, instead of using a thin mixture with solvent, you've used water mixable in its place where you can paint it thin. And then after that, you can continue with one or the other. You can continue with water mixable or non-water mixable, because it's just pure paint. You don't have to put any terps in your
Eric, that's exactly right. 100%. And it's so liberating once you get the hang of that, because guess what? That's actually a better way to paint anyway. Conservators say that it's better not to have thin, terpsy layers, because oil paint should be heavier, and pretty much most of this will get covered up. The initial dark that I put down was fairly thick to begin with, and that was water mixable. So I will allow that one little difference. But if I can, sometimes I just leave these full-bodied paint areas alone.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I strive to have overall a thicker paint passage, and mostly because I like that look. I just like how thick paint looks. Yeah. And so ergo, starting with very thin paint gives me like this spectrum to then build thicker and thicker. And I did want to talk about in this demo, if it came up, this idea of a lot of one thing and a little bit of something else. So this can apply to all types of things. There's this idea of no two intervals the same, or there's this idea of, like I said before, a lot to a little. And other artists have presented that concept in different books. You might read it termed differently, but it's this idea of no two intervals the same. So it could apply to shape. I don't want this shape to repeat here. I don't want this interval to repeat here. So my tree has been extended. So even though it looks like I'm just popping down shapes, I've worked out the design so that even my arches for the bridge are going to be a little bit different. They're not quite all the same. Same thing with my orange to blue ratio. I don't want to have that 50-50. I want to have predominantly one or the other. Anytime you do 50-50, including dividing your painting exactly in half. So what did I do? I didn't do 50-50. I raised up this high point of interest, this high point of contrast, to be more in that 3/4 range. So I like
that applies to warm and cool. It applies to composition. It applies to everything. I think it's pretty
exactly
smart.
That is exactly right.
So when you're out in the field painting, are you carrying Cobra for your underpainting and then regular oil paint for your overpainting, or are you just doing the whole thing in Cobra? I'm just curious.
I do a little bit of both. Sometimes when I travel overseas, I travel fairly light. And I've found this liberation in painting directly because it challenges me to paint with really thick layers. And so just for ease of cleanup, because yes, I do have to clean my brushes at the end of the day, or let's say I'm traveling overseas, you can't take solvent on a plane or even locally, you can't take solvent on a plane. But I've done, I just did some highlights with this, which used to be my dark brush. So you don't, I think people over clean their brush and in general have too many terpsy moments. But
Terpsy moments.
yes, but like the scratch down terpy stuff sliding down, that always actually really bothered me when I, way back at the dawn of time when I was using solvent, and unbeknownst to me was getting more allergic to it.
Yeah.
But so my favorite way when I travel, and I travel very light, is just to do the water mixable. But there is something to be said for the traditional paints. Maybe there's a special color, different manufacturers. We all know the joy of art supplies, and different manufacturers just create different levels of paint as far as either pigment load, or you can get the same exact pigment and they just manufacture it a little bit differently. I think I was reading that depending on how they heat the pigment, it can be different, and just all
Well,
types
what
of.
I found is that I could not get really, really good darks in some of the water mixables. Now that was early on, it may have changed, but I felt like I could only get really good darks with a good dark oil. But, a lot of painters will take the same concept and they'll paint underpainting in acrylic and then overpainting in oil. Um, so that's an option as well. I took solvent out of my life and I just don't do any thin underlayer. I just go to direct painting now.
Oh, well, you should try this, Eric. I think you'd like it. I,
I am
I
going to
actually
try it.
have to take issue with the acrylic. I know some people out there are going to say, no, Christine's wrong. But, before I endorse these paints and working thin, I would like to say that when I work thin like this and I use water, I am mindful to, for the most part, then paint over that. So it's a foundation. But I've visited with museum conservators, and most of them have. I was curious about the acrylic thing too, because it's like, well, why don't you just use acrylic? And uh, they pretty much freaked out. This was at the Smithsonian. You can make an appointment and go and visit with conservators at the Smithsonian. They were doing a study on water mixable oils on the original samples that they had that were 30 years old, and they were doing photo aged, enhanced, current modern samples. It was very interesting, their preliminary findings. But anyway, they said they were appalled. They said, "Oh no, please never, no, you should never use acrylic," and then
So
put something over it.
there's a famous story that Odd Nerdrum, the great artist in Norway, got sued because he used to put a ground of acrylic house paint underneath because it was
Oh,
cheap, and he had a $1 million painting that was hanging over a radiator, and the radiator melted the acrylic, and the whole painting just fell off onto the radiator.
oh my gosh, I
and
haven't
and
heard that.
and
Wow.
he got sued. This actually led to, from what I understand, a lot of the difficulties that he had, which he's since resolved. I mean, he replaced the painting and everything, and I'm sure he doesn't do that anymore. And I don't know if it's even true, but I think, and I know a lot of painters still who are pretty prominent painters who are using acrylic. So that's interesting to hear.
It's it's one conservator, and maybe there's another one out there that, well, it was two I met with that day, but maybe there's some others out there that would disagree. And I think, Eric, there's always something new to be learned about our materials and educating ourselves. And that's just the thing, is to do the best job that you can. Keep, that's why we're here today, right? Is to be educating ourselves on maybe some new ideas and fun different things to try.
Well, I do miss the thin underpainting, and so I may try this, and maybe I'll just carry a single color, like a burnt sienna or burnt umber or something for my underpainting, and then that way I can at least get the thing laid in.
Exactly. This transparent oxide is really great for that. And I think that is the deal with the transparent oxide, is that because it's a modern milled paint, it is it's just a better, like, finer ground than some of the like burnt umber or burnt sienna or things like that that are the
Yeah.
earth pigments. They have a coarser pigment, and that, for some reason, it's a subtle difference. And whoever is out there that likes their burnt umber underpainting for grisaille, or that's the tonal underpainting, go for it. But like you, Eric, I really was hungry for really beefy, full body darks when I started my painting, especially if I'm going to be doing a nocturne. I don't want to mess around with having to chase some darks, and make sure that I want to make sure like I said, the foundation is set for my painting.
Yep. Well,
All right.
Cheryl in the comments says, I have asthma. This is why I use watercolors, but I still always learn from watching these videos. I love your advice. And so maybe Cheryl and others who have allergies or asthma or other things, now they can go to oils by using water mixable.
Yeah, and especially in the winter, that was another thing in the winter. And I made the switch. My kids are in their 20s now, but I made the switch when I was pregnant with my kids, because I thought, well, that's, mineral spirits they have right there on it. Just because it's odorless does not mean that it isn't toxic. They say use with adequate ventilation, and there's all types of warnings. And I thought, well, I just don't want this in the studio. I don't want the fumes. And yes, it's a great thing to explore. Definitely give it a try. I'm going to talk, unless
All right.
there's other questions, just go ahead and interrupt me. But I'm just
go.
going to talk about this idea of notice I'm creating what I term reality first, and then I'm going to focus on the flip of the reflections. And so this bridge, I talk about this in my Vibrant Landscapes video. Even though we're doing a daytime scene, we go in with just almost crude watercolor studies just to understand the concepts. And I show photos with schematic overlays of how reflections are actually happening. But there's a point, I think about this, like if a boat was here, or this is what I call the horizontal plane, and then the vertical plane. So that juncture point, which is where the bridge is coming into the water, you can actually measure that. And this will show me where this line of traffic, or, faraway cafes or something like that, that's going to show me where that bright point is going to be shining into the water. So I'm just going to, also this archway. So this archway, how's that going to reflect? Technically, that's going to reflect like this on the water. So I can measure from here to here. And then if I wanted to get this reflecting, I could measure from here to here.
Question.
And then I just drop that down.
So in painting in daytime, reflections are typically darker than what you see. Is the opposite true at nighttime?
Well, actually, reflections are what I classify less than. So this will be less vibrant. This will be less dark. So this dark is going to reflect a little bit lighter. And sometimes photos do not show that piece of information. And in nighttime scenes, because this is so dark to begin with, this is going to be pretty minimal for what you see reflected. Like the shift, you could get away with a little bit of it. But what I'm doing is mixing it with my blue to just soften this reflection a little bit. If you saw this in person, this might be a full on 10 on the value scale, but this would be a 9. So that would be less dark. Then if this is brown, this will reflect less brown. So this orange is going to reflect less orange. And if it's mid-tone, Eric, then you can go a little bit darker. And that's true whether or not you're in the day or you're at night. And nighttime scenes can be a little confusing because, the photo just picks up the bling and the dazzle, and it's real tempting to have that reflect exactly just so and start getting involved with that. So what's happening here? How come I don't do this with my bridge and, all of this more exactly? I mean, this would be still water, but what's happening with Paris scene, so fun to visit Paris for a couple of minutes today.
Yeah.
Let's just put, some of these bridge lights in here.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
When you intermix cobras with non-water mixable oils, how do you clean your brushes?
Oh, yes. That's a good question.
That's from India.
I basically I keep stacking my paint. So this was my dark brush and now it's light. This also helps me work just with full bodied paint. So if I'm done with my painting session, I just stick them in the freezer because I paint pretty much every day. Now, I mentioned going on a trip and what would happen if I went on a trip. I mean, I don't want to be, trucking wet brushes around like if I'm in Paris and I'm flying to Florence, do I want wet brushes in my luggage? No. And so, yeah, I got to clean them occasionally. And if you have water mixable, it's pretty easy. They clean up with soap and water. In the case of me using my traditional paints here, it's real simple to just put this brush in some oil, like walnut oil or linseed oil, and then you can use Master's brush soap to clean it. It takes a little bit more elbow grease.
But oil cleans oil.
What's that?
Oil cleans oil.
Yes, it's pretty handy. So I'm not saying I have, the answer to every paint technique. This works for me. This works for my small studio. This works for me having pets and my family in close proximity to my studio. Different situation might be good for somebody else, but it works for me. So to get back to what is happening here, why don't I take this and mirror this exactly? Let's think about that. If I took this bright area and made this reflect exactly, this would be in a very still water situation. What happens with agitated water is this gets broken up and it pulls down. We could still be using that lot to a little idea where there's a lot of color here. So there's going to be less of that here because I'm always looking for that variety. And with agitated water, it starts to get disrupted. So in addition to what I was talking about before, this very tidy edge where I want the crispness of reality to be present, I can't have this edge as crisp. So this, basically I'm making a circle too, which is hello, right kind of in the middle of my painting. And in the case of Paris, you could see here that this is very agitated. So this has become obscured, and then you can kind of mix your colors in choppy ways to start looking at how this light gets refracted as it moves down. The other thing that you might notice with regard to my reference is the photo has a lot of polarity of super black and then bleached out white. If we were there in person, what we would see is we would see into the shadows. Even on a nighttime situation, we'd see maybe that there's reflected light on the little area of there's like a road here. And we might see how, let's say there's lights here, and they might be casting some softer areas of transition in this area. There's a strong light here. And this is a really wonderful, bustling area where people have picnics and they might want to because what do I have? I have a lot of fat, big shapes. it's going to be to the best interest of my painting to have some smaller marks. And this might be too equal. I don't like how everything's coming to a wedge here. So I'll sit there and fuss around with some stuff at times.
Makes me want to be in Paris.
I know.
What is the boat? The Mouton Rouge or something, I think is Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Is the boat that goes through underneath the canals.
Bateau mouche. You
Baton
know what?
Rouge.
Those are flies. They call it Bateau mouche is a fly.
Okay, well, I maybe my name is wrong. Anyway, I have lots of memories of drinking champagne and going through Paris. Can't wait to do it again. Maybe I'll take a group to Paris. That'd be fun.
Should.
I don't have enough time in the world. That's the problem. It's all these trips.
I know.
We're taking a group to New Zealand in September.
Oh, that's really fun.
It is fun.
I hear that's an amazing place.
Pretty incredible. So what happened there? You just decided to reduce the amount of busyness underneath your arch?
Yes, just reduce some of the chatter. I want the lights to hold sway for the viewer's interest. And I'm kind of chipping away at the pure white that I have left. I mean, there's a lot of manipulation to the image. And of course, this is a 12 by 16. I don't know if I've ever done a 12 by 16 in this amount of time. So it's more to illustrate.
Run out of time before long. So
well, it's more to illustrate the concept, but it is so fun to just play with value and see how far that can get you.
You were an excellent teacher. If you guys are enjoying this, make sure that you forward it to others, share it, like it, heart it, etc. Tell your friends in India and Italy and New Zealand and Turkey and Poland and Dubrovnik and England, all these other places watching.
It is so wonderful that artists all over the world can be doing this and watching. It's just great. Notice what this little tiny dot is doing. I don't know if you can see even in a small form on the screen. So this goes back to that visually, please entertain my eye. So this dot in the middle of all of this kind of soft mid-tone is really packing a punch. How am I going to deal with that? I might add some friend dots here.
Friend dots.
And possibly link this. And I'm not thinking about, notice how I haven't thought about individual windows. How many windows are really on that building? One of the wonderful things about Europe is that we never know. A building might have been boarded up. There's wonky windows everywhere. There's half buildings. There's a building leaning. And so Europe is just very forgiving as far as the structure that is provided there. And it lends itself to kind of some abstraction of some of your building shapes that you have going on.
Svetlana has a question. Does Christine create a study for a future painting, or is this a finished loose painting, or will it be?
Usually demo paintings are just that. This is on Zoom or Facebook Live, and it's going to be a different type of painting. I picked something that was going to be high contrast and show the big shapes and show the concepts. And to answer that question specifically, I don't often do a study, and maybe that's a failing of mine. I've been trying to work on that, Eric. That's something I'm working on, to do a better job with some studies. I like to see, in a way, I consider this a study because it's so loose. I like to see the painting develop in real time. That makes me really happy. And it can lead to some failed things, but it's also really fun to just slap down paint and see it happen. There's something just very satisfying about that.
Yeah. I don't want to make you nervous, but the great Kevin McPherson is watching.
Oh, good. Oh, that's
and
awesome.
Joanna Arnett. Oh, man, that'd make me nervous painting in front of those two.
Oh, I saw Kevin at my show. He and I he had a show in Charleston and I did. And then somebody's like, hey, Kevin McPherson is in your show. And I thought, oh, wow. Okay. And Joanna Arnett, I painted with her at an event one time. She's wonderful.
She sure is. She and Kevin will be at the Plein Air Convention this year. And coming up in like 5 weeks from, I don't know, today's the 13th. It starts on the 17th. So
Oh,
about
that's
5
exciting.
weeks. Yeah, it's exciting. And they've lifted all the restrictions. Now we don't have to, we were going to have to limit the number of people attending, and now we don't have to. Yay.
That's wonderful news. Well, congratulations, Eric. You must be thrilled.
Well, I am thrilled.
Work hard on that.
They do work hard. I've got a great team. I'm very, very happy.
So basically what I'm doing to increase some of the drama is I'm tidying up some of the shapes now. You can see that the iPad is great for kind of zooming in and keeping me on track with things. What I have to be careful about is that in this photo, there's so much white, but if we look at the scatter collection of dots, this is pretty interesting. I know from being there on location that this was a red awning. I think I'm going to try to put in some of that. I kind of also like to work from crummy photos. A lot of times I see people having their wonderful cameras on location, and I think there's something to be said for just bad or poor iPhone photos. Sometimes I'll actually move my camera as I take a reference, because this is how the human eye sees. We don't see with ultra fidelity every last little thing depicted. So don't worry if you don't have, huh?
Cameras are liars.
They are. That's why we paint, because it's more true than what camera can dish out. So basically,
even when you're making your brightest whites, you're putting a little touch of yellow in those. Yes.
I am exactly doing that. Yep, that's what I was going to say, is that now I'm just gathering. I mean, you can see the paint is just hanging off of here. And it's easy to overdo this. So I'm also cleaning up any white substrate areas and introducing a little bit softer edges. This is going to help the areas of dazzle kind of pop out as well. Want to break up this line, possibly introduce a little bit of just the suggestion of something kind of highlighting that tree. That's what happens, is the foliage starts to pick up in that area. The foliage picks up a little bit of that ambient light. And this is really fun. If watercolor has helped me out a lot, even though I work in oil, the idea of things kind of flowing together with watercolor and not being afraid to try things. For example, if I want a big fat highlight on here, if I want to maybe emphasize this part of the bridge and then possibly a little bit of the under area, you could see I'm just dragging the color around. At this point, I'm also not so worried about gray color because I've set up all of my brights. This might be a situation where you could get into, there's chalky color, or a lot of artists talk about being mindful with your color and trying to shift it to warm or cool. And this gives me a little bit of freedom to play because I've kind of set the stage with all of that drama. So going to your grays kind of at the last little bit and pulling together all of the color it's kind of a good MO. Just to...
You're talking like a cop.
My dad was a cop, so maybe
there you go. That's why it's in your language.
Yeah.
Well, thank him for his service. And you're in the Washington, D.C. area, or Baltimore? Where are you?
Yes, I'm in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay. We will make sure we put your website in there. Anybody wants to contact you about your workshops and so on, that'd be great.
Sure. Yes, we can now paint in person. It's very exciting. And I'm looking forward to Denver next year. I
Oh, that's
hope
right.
to.
You're going to be on the faculty next year in Denver.
Yes, I've
Outstanding.
really loved painting Western scenes. I know we're doing Paris today, but there's something about it's again more drama. I do like drama in my scenes, so I'm gonna get this reflected in here
You know, my
just a little
rule,
bit.
no drama is my rule, except in paintings.
Only art drama.
Art drama is good. All right. We're going to have to wrap it up, Christine.
Okay,
Come back on
well,
camera so everybody can meet you.
okay. I
All
have to
right.
remember which button to push here. Give me just a
Okay.
second.
All right. Our guest today is Christine Lashley. Everybody, round of applause. That was so wonderful.
Oh, thanks.
I need some applause sound effects here. I don't know what I've got. So anyway, thank you so much, Christine. That was fabulous. And
You're
I
welcome.
encourage everybody to share it. This was very valuable. And I learned a lot of lessons about a lot of things, including underpainting and water mixable oils and a lot. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And, happy painting to everybody out there, new stuff to try, and always no fear. Can always
Always no
scrape it
fear.
down,
That's
right?
right. Absolutely. Thank you, Christine.